They called it a fresh start, a clean slate. But for Isaiah Cross, there was no such thing. As he stepped through the wide glass doors of Westbridge High, he could already feel the weight of invisible eyes pressing against his back. Whispers hadn't started yet, but they would. They always did. He didn't wear his past on his face, but the moment someone heard his name, the atmosphere would change. It always changed. Cross. Not just a name, a warning, a shadow, a reminder. His mother had done everything she could to get them out of St. Louis, away from the crime, the stigma, the legacy. New town, new life, she had told him. But the world didn't let you outrun blood, especially not when that blood came from Malcolm Cross, ex-gang affiliate, suspected crime boss, the kind of man you only spoke about behind closed doors. And Isaiah? He was just his son. That was enough. In the cafeteria, he didn't even make it past the first 10 steps before someone tried him. A blonde kid with perfect posture and a smirk that said he owned the room. "Lost, huh?" the boy had asked, voice smooth, lazy, but sharpened at the edges. There were chuckles. Not loud, not yet. But Isaiah could feel it building, the tension, the bait, the test. He'd seen it before. This was more than bullying. This was a game of dominance. And he already knew the rules. The boy was Preston Hale. Everyone knew his name before they even stepped foot in the building. Son of a senator. Crown Prince of Westbridge. Charismatic. Cruel. Unchecked. Isaiah kept his voice steady. Calm. "I don't need a map to find a seat," he said flatly. There was a flicker in Preston's eyes. Amusement? Interest? Threat? It didn't matter. Isaiah knew exactly what this was. A war had just begun, and no one at Westbridge High had any idea who they'd just challenged. Preston didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to throw punches or start fights. All he had to do was exist. At Westbridge High, his name traveled faster than morning announcements. He was the kind of student whose locker was never searched, whose tardies were always excused, and whose enemies simply faded from relevance. The son of Senator Jonathan Hale Preston was legacy, image, influence, and he wore it like a tailored suit. He wasn't loud, he didn't need to be. With a glance, he could rearrange the social architecture of the school. With a single sentence, whispered into the right ear, he could bury someone in rumor and ruin. His power wasn't physical, it was cultural, inherited, and reinforced by a system that never questioned him. And now, there was Isaiah Cross, an unknown, a disruption. Preston noticed things others didn't. He saw how Isaiah walked not scared, but contained, like a fuse wound tight and tucked behind calm eyes. He saw how Isaiah didn't shrink from confrontation, didn't play along. That was dangerous. The school didn't run on academics or athletics, it ran on fear, hierarchy, silence. Isaiah didn't respect any of those. "He's got that look," Preston muttered to Nick and Jace during lunch, his voice quiet, but his tone unmistakably serious. "The kind that thinks rules don't apply to him." Nick raised an eyebrow. "Because of his dad?" Preston's smirk was slow, deliberate. "No, because he thinks he's not his dad." That's what annoyed him the most, not the connection to Malcolm Cross, but Isaiah's refusal to act like it mattered, as if he could just waltz in and rewrite the story. Preston hated stories he didn't control, so he planted the first seeds. A whisper to a sophomore, "Keep an eye on the new guy." A quiet comment in gym class, "Heard he used to fight a lot back home." A quick nudge to a junior in student council, "Might want to check who's hanging around the equipment room." It didn't take long. Rumors bloomed like weeds in the cracks of the school's polished hallways. Isaiah Cross, the kid who hadn't said more than 10 words his first day, was already being watched. Preston leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the cafeteria. Power didn't require force. It only required direction. And Isaiah had just stepped into his crosshairs. By the end of his third day at Westbridge, Isaiah Cross already knew what kind of game he was in. It started small, too small for anyone to call out. A few passing glances that lingered longer than they should have. A senior who bumped into him in the hallway without apology. A teacher who paused when reading his last name on the attendance sheet, then pretended not to. He didn't react. He couldn't afford to. Every breath he took was already being judged. By Friday morning, his locker had been trashed, books scattered, pages torn, a half-empty bottle of blue Gatorade poured across the bottom shelf. No one saw it happen. Or if they did, they didn't say a word. Isaiah stared at the mess, then quietly began gathering what was salvageable. A deep breath, no emotion, no complaints. He walked to class with damp notebooks and Gatorade-soaked math homework in his backpack. Preston Hale hadn't touched him, not directly, but Isaiah could feel his fingerprints all over everything. The chaos was too organized, too surgical to be random. It wasn't meant to hurt him physically. It was meant to wear him down, to strip away the thin hope he carried that maybe, just maybe, this school would be different. Every time he walked down a hallway, the whispers followed. Is that him? Yeah, that's Cross's kid. Heard he broke a guy's jaw at his last school. I bet he's just like his father. No one said it to his face, but they didn't have to. He could feel it in the way their voices dropped when he passed by, in the sudden silences, in the sideways glances and forced smiles. Isaiah knew what was happening. He was being shaped, molded, stuffed into a narrative that didn't belong to him. And if he lashed out, if he said anything, he'd be giving them exactly what they wanted. So, he stayed quiet. He kept his head down. He waited. But in silence, there was a cost. Each time he walked away, something inside him pulled tighter, coiled harder. The restraint that kept him in check became a weight on his shoulders. One misstep, one wrong breath, and they'd label him a threat. And if that happened, nothing, not his silence, not his control, could protect him anymore. The silence was no longer a shield, it was a prison. By the following week, Isaiah Cross had mastered the art of walking through hallways like a ghost. Eyes forward, shoulders square, no emotion. But inside, the tension kept building, knotting tighter with every laugh he ignored, every glance he pretended not to notice, every whisper that stuck to his skin like static. They weren't just watching him now, they were testing him. In gym class, someone accidentally elbowed him in the ribs during a game of dodgeball. In the cafeteria, a carton of milk tipped just as he passed by, splattering across his jeans. No one admitted to it. The teachers gave polite warnings. Nothing changed. He could feel it. They wanted him to explode. They wanted him to swing first so they could say, "See? Told you he was dangerous." The pressure followed him home. His mother, Renee, noticed. She didn't ask questions, just gave him longer hugs, cooked his favorite meals, and kept her eyes a little too bright during dinner. She wanted to believe things were getting better. But Isaiah knew she was lying to herself. And he couldn't lie anymore either. That night, he texted his uncle. Uncle Jalen didn't say much when Isaiah showed up at his apartment, just opened the door, handed him a water bottle, and nodded toward the old boxing gym in the back. The place hadn't changed. The heavy bag still hung crooked. The gloves still smelled of sweat and leather and something like memory. "You're walking like your fists are full," Jalen said quietly, as Isaiah started wrapping his hands. Isaiah didn't answer. "You think keeping it all in makes you strong?" Jalen continued. "It doesn't. It just makes you heavy." Isaiah tightened the straps. "What am I supposed to do? Hit back and prove them right?" "No," Jalen said. "You hit back when the time is right and only if it's your choice, not theirs." They trained in silence. The bag shook with every blow. Isaiah didn't speak, but each punch said more than words ever could. Frustration, fear, rage, control. And when he finally dropped his arms, chest heaving, Jalen stepped forward. "You don't get to choose what they think of your name," he said, "but you do get to choose what you stand for." Isaiah didn't reply, but for the first time in days, he didn't feel like he was suffocating. By Monday afternoon, the air at Westbridge felt heavier, as if the school itself was bracing for something no one could name. Isaiah had made it through most of the day without incident, just the usual stares and half-muttered jabs, white noise by now. But he felt it in his chest, a storm waiting for the right moment to break. That moment came in the parking lot. He was heading toward the back gate, earbuds in, bag slung over one shoulder, when a cold splash hit him dead center. Sticky soda soaked through his hoodie, trailing down his arms and legs. He froze. Laughter. The same kind of laughter he'd heard in the cafeteria. The kind that didn't come from a joke, it came from cruelty. Isaiah turned slowly. Preston Hale stood 10 feet away, surrounded by Nick, Jace, and 2 others. The empty cup still dangled from Preston's fingers. "Oops," he said, raising both hands in mock innocence. "Didn't see you there." Isaiah stared at him. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He could hear his uncle's voice in his head. "Make it your choice, not theirs." But there was no choice here, not anymore. Preston took a step closer, smirk sharpened. "What's wrong, Cross? Scared? I thought you people were always ready to swing." That did it. Isaiah dropped his backpack carefully to the ground, as if setting down a burden he'd carried too long. The circle around them hushed. Students walking to the bus line slowed, turned. Everyone could feel it. Preston stepped forward again. Finally ready to act like who you really are? Isaiah didn't answer. He moved. Too quick for Preston to react. A feint to the left made Preston shift. Then came the real strike, a sharp blow to the ribs that knocked the breath out of him, followed by a clean right hook to the jaw. Preston stumbled back, dazed. Isaiah didn't hesitate. One final uppercut, fluid and full of years of control, sent Preston crashing to the pavement. Silence. The kind that makes the world feel paused. Isaiah stood over him, hoodie soaked, breathing steady. His voice was low but clear. "Are you done?" No one answered. No one moved. Isaiah picked up his backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and walked away, not as the boy they whispered about, but as the one they'd never forget. By Tuesday morning, Isaiah Cross wasn't just the new kid anymore. He was the name on everyone's lips. He didn't need to check his phone. He could feel it the moment he walked through the front doors. The buzz in the hallways had changed tone. No longer just whispers laced with rumor and prejudice, now there was something else mixed in. Respect, fear, curiosity. Students parted when he passed. Some gave subtle nods, others avoided eye contact altogether, and some just stared, like they were trying to figure out whether what they'd heard was really true. Did he actually knock Preston out? Did he break his jaw? Is he dangerous or just tired of being pushed? Isaiah didn't answer any of it. He just walked. Not faster, not slower, just steady. In his homeroom class, Preston's seat sat empty. The space around it felt colder than usual, as if even his absence still held power. No one dared say why he wasn't there, but they all knew. Isaiah could tell who had watched the fight by how they shifted when he entered a room. He could also tell who hadn't seen it, but had heard enough to fill in the blanks. And then there were the teachers. They didn't mention it, not directly, but a few looked at him longer during attendance. One asked if everything was all right at home. Another hoped there wouldn't be any more disruptions. Isaiah kept his responses short. "Yes, ma'am. All good, sir." Inside, though, the questions churned. He hadn't lashed out. He hadn't lost control. But the school didn't care about that. They only saw the punch, the body on the ground, the silence that followed. By lunch, Naomi Torres found him sitting alone. "You do realize the whole school's treating you like you just dethroned a king, right?" Isaiah didn't look up. "Didn't do it for that." "I know," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "But they don't." She placed her phone on the table. A blurry video was paused on the screen. Isaiah, in mid-strike. "This is circulating. Fast." Isaiah didn't flinch. "People are listening now," Naomi said. "But what you do next, that's what they'll remember." Isaiah looked at her for a long moment. He didn't ask who filmed it. He only asked one thing. "What do you remember?" Naomi smiled faintly. "You didn't swing first." And in that moment, Isaiah realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The gym smelled like sweat, rubber, and quiet judgment. Coach Ramsey didn't say much when Isaiah first walked in, just nodded toward the wrestling mat and tossed him a pair of training shoes. "I don't need another fighter," he said. "I need someone who can learn." Isaiah caught the shoes midair, not replying. He didn't come here to prove anything, not to Ramsey, not to the team, not even to himself. At least that's what he told himself. But deep down, something was shifting. Something raw inside him wanted to be shaped into control, not chaos. The first practice was brutal. The takedowns were quick, the landings were hard. Isaiah was strong. Years of boxing with Uncle Jalen had sharpened his reflexes, but this was different. Wrestling wasn't about striking fast. It was about holding, controlling, using the opponent's strength against them. And Isaiah was still fighting like someone with something to prove. Ethan, a junior captain and one of Ramsey's top wrestlers, didn't go easy on him. By the third takedown, Isaiah's shoulder hit the mat hard. He lay there, breath short, staring up at the ceiling beams. "You're all power, no patience," Ethan said, stepping back. "That might win you fights in the parking lot, not here." Coach Ramsey watched from the sidelines, arms crossed. "Get up, Cross." Isaiah rolled to his feet, wiped sweat from his brow, and reset his stance. There was no crowd here, no Preston, no whispers, just him and the mat. Again. This time he didn't charge. He waited, read Ethan's weight, his center of balance. And when Ethan lunged, Isaiah pivoted barely but enough. Ethan stumbled, just a little. It wasn't a win, but it was a shift, a moment of control. Ramsey's voice cut through the silence. Good. You're learning. Isaiah felt something stir in his chest. Not pride, not victory, but something quieter. Discipline. After practice, Coach Ramsey pulled him aside. You're not here to erase what people think of you. You're here to become who you think you are. Isaiah nodded, exhausted but grounded. That night, back home, he stood in front of the mirror, bruises blooming across his arms. For once, he didn't see a reflection of his father or the boy in the parking lot. He saw someone becoming something else. Not a name, not a reputation, but a fighter on his own terms. Preston Hale returned to Westbridge High exactly 1 week after the parking lot fight, but not as the same person. He walked the halls with a new kind of silence. Gone was the theatrical arrogance, the smirking bravado. In its place was something colder, calculated. The bruises on his jaw had faded, but what lingered behind his eyes was something Isaiah recognized all too well. Vengeance, without noise. Most students steered clear. They remembered what had happened. But Preston didn't need an audience anymore. He wasn't coming back to reclaim his image. He was coming back to rewrite the story. Isaiah noticed it right away. It started with whispers this time, not about Isaiah's father or his fists, but about him, personally, that he was getting special treatment from Coach Ramsey, that he was using the fight to manipulate sympathy, that maybe he wanted the fight from the beginning. At first, Isaiah shrugged it off, but then Naomi's article and expose she had been working on about bullying and silence at Westbridge vanished from the student paper's website. No explanation, no notice. When she asked the faculty advisor, all she got was a shrug and a vague comment about protecting the school's image. Later that day, Coach Ramsey was pulled into a closed-door meeting with the principal. The message was clear. Someone was pulling strings. That someone wore a well-tailored jacket, came from a powerful family, and had something to prove. Preston didn't confront Isaiah directly. He didn't need to. He was smarter than that. He let others carry the weight. Nick, Jace, a few new faces who suddenly had a lot to say about keeping sports clean and what kind of role models we want. Isaiah watched it unfold like a slow unraveling. And this time, there were no fists thrown, no soda cups, just quiet sabotage turning people one by one, whisper by whisper. Naomi sat beside him after lunch that day, her eyes stormy. He's not trying to beat you, Isaiah. He's trying to erase you. Isaiah didn't respond right away. He looked down at his calloused hands, still sore from the last round of training. He won't, he said simply, because Isaiah had already learned something Preston hadn't. A punch can bruise a face. But control rewrites the rules. And Isaiah wasn't playing by Preston's anymore. The message came after sixth period, handwritten, folded, slipped into Isaiah's locker with no name, no explanation, behind the football field, 5 minutes, no one else, just talk. Isaiah didn't need a signature. He already knew who it was from. Preston was done hiding behind whispers. Naomi warned him not to go. It's a trap, she said flatly. You know it, I know it. I do, Isaiah replied. Then why walk into it? He didn't answer, because this wasn't just about Preston anymore. It was about who controlled the narrative, and Isaiah was tired of being defined by silence. When he reached the back field, the truth was waiting. Preston stood near the goalpost, arms crossed, posture casual, but Isaiah could see the stiffness in his stance, the tension behind the smirk. But it wasn't just Preston. Flanking him were Nick, Jace, and 4 others Isaiah didn't recognize, upperclassmen from other teams, maybe even students with no stake in the fight. Just eyes and fists, waiting for a show. So much for just talk, Isaiah muttered. Preston shrugged. Talk's overrated. Thought we'd skip to the part where you realize you don't belong here. Isaiah stood his ground, eyes scanning the circle tightening around him, 6-1. The math didn't favor him, but he didn't flinch. Funny, Isaiah said, voice steady. I thought that's what you realized the day you hit the pavement. Nick bristled. Jace cracked his knuckles. Preston's smirk faltered just for a second. You think this is about a fight? Preston said, stepping closer. You embarrassed me. In front of the whole school. That's not something people like me forget. No, Isaiah replied. It's something people like you can't live with. Silence. Tense. Still. Then, a voice from the shadows. I got that last part on video. Everyone turned. Naomi stepped out from behind the bleachers, holding her phone steady, red light blinking. Smile, boys, it's going live. The tension cracked. Nick stepped back. Jace cursed under his breath. The others shifted nervously, unsure of what they'd just walked into. Preston's jaw clenched. "You brought her here?" he hissed. "I didn't need to," Isaiah said. "You brought this on yourself." The circle broke. One by one, they backed off, no punches thrown, no violence, just exposure. And in that moment, Isaiah didn't need to fight, because power wasn't in fists, it was in control. The gym was packed. Not with the usual noise of lunchtime banter or hallway drama, but with focused silence, the kind that filled the air before a storm. It was Isaiah's first official wrestling match. No locker room fights, no parking lot brawls, just him, a mat, and a whistle. As he stepped onto the mat, the overhead lights felt warmer than usual, spotlighting every step he took. In the stands, he saw familiar faces: Coach Ramsey, arms crossed and unreadable; Naomi, phone down for once, eyes locked on him; and his mother, sitting near the back, hands clutched tightly together, but her gaze steady. He didn't see Preston, but he didn't need to. Preston's shadow no longer dictated his story. His opponent was taller, broader across the shoulders, a regional finalist with a reputation for brute strength. The kind of match that, even weeks ago, might have rattled Isaiah. But now, he felt steady. The whistle blew. Isaiah didn't rush. He circled, watched, waited. When the first grapple came, he didn't resist. It was instinct now. He let the force come to him, redirected it, used balance over strength, timing over tension. It was a dance he had only just begun to understand, but his body knew more than his fear did. He was no longer fighting to prove anything. Not to the school, not to coach, not to Preston. He was wrestling to own his name. The match stretched long minutes, felt like hours, every second a test of resolve. But Isaiah didn't break, didn't lose control. And when he finally pinned his opponent's shoulder to the mat and the referee raised his arm, the applause came like thunder. He didn't smile, he didn't celebrate, he just breathed. Because this win wasn't about points on a scoreboard, it was about choice. Afterward, in the quiet locker room, Coach Ramsey walked over. "You wrestled like someone who knows who he is." Isaiah nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm not running anymore," he said simply. "Good," Coach replied, "because people are finally watching for the right reasons." Later, as he stepped outside into the cold air, Isaiah paused. For the first time since he arrived at Westbridge High, he didn't feel like a stranger walking someone else's path. He was no longer just the son of Malcolm Cross. He was Isaiah, and that was enough. In a world where people are often judged by their past, their family, or where they come from, Isaiah Cross's story reminds us of a quiet but powerful truth. Who you were born as doesn't define who you choose to become. Isaiah could have followed the path others expected of him: anger, violence, and rebellion. But instead, he chose discipline over destruction, self-control over impulse. He teaches us that true strength isn't about dominance, it's about mastering the storms within. For older generations, this story holds a deeper message, that redemption, growth, and self-respect are not reserved for the young. They are lifelong choices. Whether in family, community, or our own personal struggles, we all carry names, histories, and burdens. But we also carry the power to rise above them with grace, patience, and quiet determination. In a time where the world rushes to label and divide, perhaps the greatest lesson is this: dignity is not given, it is chosen, moment by moment, by those who refuse to be defined by anyone but themselves. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.